The rats and mice will be exposed to radio frequency energy from the two technologies, CDMA and GSM, currently used at two frequencies, 900 and 1900 megahertz. Because of the complexity of these studies, we're working with experts from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. NIST scientists have developed a system that provides uniform exposures to radio frequency radiation to unrestrained rodents in the frequency bands used in mobile communications. This design allows for exposures for up to 20 hours per day, in contrast to the most comprehensive rodent cancer studies carried out to date in Europe using restrained animals, where exposures were only to 2 hours per day. The system consists of 21 chambers assembled in Switzerland and installed in IIT Research Institute laboratories in Chicago. The chambers are essentially shielded rooms with a transmitting antenna radiating radio frequency fields and rotating stirrers to generate statistically uniform fields. The NTP is conducting studies in 3 phases. Pilot studies to establish field strengths that do not excessively raise body temperature. Subchronic toxicology studies where animals are exposed to various subthermal field strengths for 1 month. And chronic toxicology and carcinogenicity studies exposing animals for 24 months. The studies include both sexes of rats and mice and pregnant female rats, allowing us to examine potential health effects from exposures starting in gestation and continuing through old age. The pilot studies are nearly complete. Subchronic studies will begin early next year, and the chronic toxicology and carcinogenicity studies will start in late 2010, finish in 2012, with peer review reporting in the 2013-2014 timeframe. In addition to the NTP study, research is underway in academic institutions supported through the NIH Extramural Grants Program. The research portfolio of the National Cancer Institute includes several grants examining possible associations between cell phone use and cancer. Internationally, an NCI-funded grant is exploring possible links between exposure to electromagnetic frequencies and tumors of the brain and central nervous system. In the U.S., researchers at 5 academic centers are undertaking the first effort to examine environmental and genetic risk factors for meningioma, a tumor that forms in tissues surrounding the brain and spinal cord. Cell phone use is a major environmental risk factor being considered in this study. These grants are expected to conclude in 2011 with findings available shortly thereafter. The NIEHS is using American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funding to support researchers at UCLA studying whether exposure to cell phones in childhood can affect the central nervous system. The cohort for the study includes over 100,000 Danish children. The research team will study whether cell phone exposures are related to behavioral and developmental problems, as well as outcomes such as seizures, migraines, and sleep disturbances. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about these important studies. The studies I've described represent a significant commitment to determining whether any risks to public health are posed by the use of mobile communication devices. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bray. I was asking who is the gentleman with you? I understand you're here to try to fix a PowerPoint presentation or something like that.
Apparently I'm not good enough for that.
Not working or something. Well, that's all right. Did you have something else, Dr. Kruger, that you wanted to?
Now we do have the PowerPoint presentation. We were just going to show some pictures of the, to give you some sense of the magnitude of this operation. These are the chambers that were designed and built in Switzerland and shipped to IIT Research Institute in Chicago. You can see they're large enough to be placed on a crane and dropped through into an underground laboratory facility where they're obviously being received and moved into place. And here's a picture of the final series of 21 chambers.
I don't understand what the chambers are for.
These chambers are where the rodent studies are going to be carried out. These are the exposure chambers where the radio frequency radiation will be exposed to the rodents.
You can vary the levels and all that.
Varying levels.
Dr. Bucher, the research you described that the NTP involves animals. I can certainly understand, since we've, this committee, been involved working with researchers for many years, I can understand the value of that sort of research. You can subject these rodents to radiation in ways that you wouldn't want to try on people. I guess in these chambers, learn a lot about the basic science. But many other countries are doing studies involving humans. More so, it seems, than here in the United States. We're going to hear later about Interphone, a collaboration involving 13 countries. In fact, practically every study that will be discussed by our second panel witnesses took place overseas. So I guess a two-part question is, why hasn't there been done so far more been done here in the United States to look at the epidemiology of brain cancer among cell phone users? And why aren't we a part of the Interphone collaboration?
Well, Senator, my understanding is that we do. In fact, NCI does support part of the Interphone study. The Interphone study is a large study in 13 different countries that is supported by, or is being coordinated by the World Health Organization.
But I don't see the United States. I have a list of them. I don't see the United States listed.
I have a record that we are, in fact, supporting one of the principal investigators on the Interphone study. I could check that, certainly, and make sure.
Well, I have 13 countries. I just don't see the United States listed. I'd like to know more about that. But go ahead, then. So, why aren't we doing more on the epidemiology?
Well, I am not sure I can really answer that question. We have, I've been looking at the grant proposals that have come into the National Institutes of Health. The one study that I mentioned earlier by Elizabeth Card is being funded by the National Institutes of Health. And that is, as I understood it, looking at least some of the cohorts that are being put together for the Interphone study. I do know that the Food and Drug Administration has been working and works with an international work group from Japan, Korea, the European Union, Australia, China, and the World Health Organization. The United States participates in this international work group where they meet every year, I believe, to discuss health effects research on emerging wireless technologies, go over the recent biological research developments, and look at standards developments across countries. And they also do look into the prospects for international collaboration related to safety of these devices.
One last question, Dr. Bucher, to this. You said, and I underlined here, you said that while the weight of the current scientific evidence has not conclusively linked cell phones with any health problems, we and other scientific organizations evaluating the available studies have concluded that better data are needed to establish any potential risk to humans of these low-level radio frequency radiation exposures. Okay, the key words here are the weight of current scientific evidence has not conclusively linked cell phones with health problems. What does that mean? I mean, is the weight 60-40, 55-45, 90-10, 99-1? What is the weight on this?
Well, I specifically said that better data are needed in my testimony. There have been lots of studies on cell phone radiation. There have been human studies, there have been studies on experimental animals, there have been a wide variety of studies where a variety of tissues from animals and cells from animals have been exposed to radio frequency fields to try to determine whether there are biological effects. And I think that each of these areas with respect to this field have weaknesses, and I think that most people would generally concede that there are weaknesses in each arm of this three-legged stool, I guess, if you were to provide the weight of evidence.